You being from the southern part of India and now like practicing in the northern part of India, how do you see that section or the majority of the people see current growth towards development, technology, and current government's efforts versus people from the northern part of India? And where all there is an opportunity that people should come align and achieve the common cause of developed nation.
So I think the good part is, thanks to the explosion of information on social media, there is a comparative competition here. So people get to see infrastructure and the availability of opportunities in certain states, and therefore, notwithstanding certain political fissures which are language based between the north and the south, I know for a fact that there's been a greater movement in terms of learning languages of the north, simply because that is the economic requirement. So political भाषणबाजी के लिए आप कुछ भी कर लें, but economic realities are economic realities. And so if somebody is forced to learn Marathi because he has to work in Mahindra and Nagpur, or if he's forced to learn Hindi for whatever reason to work in other parts of the country, then they will learn. And similarly, as much as I would want this movement to happen, there is also a greater realization in a significant cross section of the northern part of the country that Hindi need not be spoken by everyone. I am not someone who's a Hindi dveshi, and please take this position on face value. I've spoken in Hindi as often as possible. I have a very dear love for the language. Even in school, I've done well in the subject. As a language which is fairly close to Sanskrit, I have more than one reason to be fond of the language, thanks to the script and whatnot. Okay. However, I am equally conscious of the reality that Bharat is like a thali with multiple options, and every dish in this thali has its own value. And fortunately, I think bridges are being built thanks to mutual efforts from both sides. So, on the economic front, I think everybody is competing to uh, make sure that their state is perhaps the lead destination for investment. Regardless of who's in power, I see the discussion happening. So, day before yesterday, I was at this Think Edu conclave of the New Indian Express in Chennai. And I happened to watch the session of the Finance Minister of Tamil Nadu, PTR Tyagarajan, who sees me as an evil force. He has said this as much, thanks to my ideological positions. But nevertheless, I respect him for his knowledge of finance and the manner in which he conducts the state. Okay, I may have my serious disagreements with his political lineage. I may also see him as an evil force when it comes to ideological issues. But there are very clear, let's say, common grounds to be met. And I'm seeing that Uttar Pradesh has woken up. That sleeping giant of a state has woken up. A state which has been constantly been rubbished as a Bimaru state and as the cow belt, the Hindi heartland, and all that. All these states have made rapid strides. For the last 10 years, I've been the special counsel for the state government of Madhya Pradesh, representing it in the Basmati litigation. And I know for a fact that on the agriculture front, Madhya Pradesh has done a fabulous job. And having delivered the goods on agriculture, it has now shifted its sights, or rather, it's now set its sights on improving its industrial policy. So I would say that thanks to international pressure, opportunities that are showing up, and greater awakening, regardless of who is in power, there are serious causes for hope. But the one thing that there is, I would say, a cause for concern is the freebie culture, which unfortunately the Delhi government seems to be pushing hard. And in the process, I think um, it cultivates a false sense of entitlement in the public, that we are entitled to free bijli, we are entitled to free this and free that. A country which aspires to be a global power, at the very least a regional power, must have a public which has a sense of responsibility. And the state has a serious role to play in shaping public discourse. But when the state encourages this kind of freebie mentality, I think it's a very serious problem. So as long as we are fighting on economics, and with with a certain degree of necessary welfare component, I don't have a problem with it. But if you wish to follow a Venezuelan model of economics, I think it's extremely irresponsible, especially for a country which is still seen as a lower middle income group country. We are not even in the middle income group country, by the way. So there are, I think, very positive signs from the societal end, but state dispensations will also need to change their attitudes. Unfortunately, voting considerations, electoral considerations undermine our economic objectives. I hope that the public is able to reject such political options in the interest of better options. Yes, next.
Thanks. Now let's spice up the afternoon. Come on, we need some interesting questions because you're not going to get a man of his stature coming here very often. Okay, youngster, yeah.
First of all, sir, Jai Shri Ram, and I hope
Jai
I'm
Shri
not
Ram.
gonna get bummed outside the gate because this is Gujarat.
Yeah.
I have two questions. Firstly, we have got a plethora of left-wing historians and left-wing political narrative setters,
Right.
and we have got a paucity of right-wing authors in India. So where do you see the problem is, and we are seeing good authors coming out now. Where do you see the problem is, and what is the remedy to it? That's the first question I have. And second question is, we have a very tempered and a narrativized history which is being taught to us. A history which is falling with one economic and one political ideology with the entire Nehru-Gandhi era, wherein Savarkar has been, tarnished as the villain of the Indian history. Where do you see the remedy lying, wherein we restructure the entire Indian history and restructure it according to the actual historical facts? Giving an example that Gandhi, who is the ambassador, known as the ambassador of peace, was the same person who supported Britishers with the entire Zulu rebellion. So
Correct.
where do you see the entire restructuring coming from the historical perspective?
So, as someone who's taken part in multiple public debates on the question of history, this much is clear that the argument has been won on the fact that what has been passed on as history to generations of Bharatiyas is a distorted Nehruvian Marxist version of it. So, in that sense, I think there is really very little response left. But I don't think it stops at that. That is merely the identification of the problem. The question is, what is the solution? On the aspect of solution, allow me to disagree with you on one aspect. There has never been, I repeat, there has never been a paucity of non-left historians producing credible work. The problem is they were never given access to channels of dissemination through the state. And allow me to again say this as a matter of constructive criticism, that remains the position even today. Which means what you see is production of content by private individuals through private publications. Now, have those publications and has that content percolated into state curriculum? The answer is a no. And for that you can't hold either the private individuals responsible, and you can't constantly blame the Gandhi, Nehru, Marxist establishment for it, because you are no more in the opposition. Having come to power, you don't get to say this when you're close to the end of the second term, that our textbooks are still like this. The responsibility for that has to fall squarely at the doors of the center. So the question would be, how seriously have you taken the MHRD appointments? How seriously have you taken the policies of the MHRD? When you had the opportunity to hit reset and do a better job of it through the NEP, did you actually do a good job of the NEP? Where is the public discourse on the criticism as well as, let's say, constructive criticism of the NEP? How many such discussions have we seen? In other jurisdictions, when content and history textbooks are changed, parents participate in discussions with experts to say this is what we want, this is what we don't want. Where are these discussions happening here? So there's a problem at two levels. How seriously do parents want their children to be exposed to the right kind of history? That is the demand aspect. How serious is the government about addressing this particular issue is the supply aspect. And there is a deficiency at both ends. It remains a storm in a teacup where this is the concern of the affluent few or the educated few or the aware few. But otherwise, it is not an electoral issue. It will never find its way into the electoral manifesto. And anything that doesn't find its way into the electoral manifesto has no value for any government. And unfortunately, it so happens that the current dispensation is an election winning machine. Therefore, it needs to be able to look at certain issues beyond the realm of merely winning elections. If your question was, okay, if the argument was, where are the people producing the content? Well, content is now available. So it's a question of populating the right kind of people in institutions such as the ICHR, the Indian Council for Historical Research. Have you seen any changes in the NCRT? No, because one of the former MHRD ministers took pride in making the statement that we have not changed a single page in the history textbook. And he wanted us to show this as a badge of honor, when in fact it is a badge of shame and a badge of non-performance as far as this department is concerned. So as much as I would want to support the government on certain other fantastic initiatives, I would certainly say on the education front, particularly with respect to history, I don't think they have done the job. It's certainly not up to the mark.
I
Yes, sir.
since you're in making inquiry towards rediscovering our roots,
Yes, sir.
cultural roots, and since you're also a lawyer, I've asked this a very basic question to a lot of friends who are lawyers. What does law mean in Hindi? And this question is for you as well as all the law department students. This is question one. Question two depends on how do you answer question one.
So, as a non-native speaker of Hindi, I would want to choose between dharma and nyaya. Nyaya is justice. However, I don't know how many people watch this movie, Mulk, by Anubhav Sinha. So at the fag end of the movie, Ashutosh Rana delivers a line, and people in theaters were clapping wildly. I thought, what idiots. Anyways, he basically said at the end of the verdict, फिर से न्याय ने धर्म को चित कर दिया. That was his statement, clearly showing how narrowly dharma has been interpreted, which is it has been approximated and triangulated to religion. If you were to ask anyone who has even a decent understanding of Hindu jurisprudence, nyaya which is inconsistent with dharma is anyaya. There cannot be a concept of justice which is beyond the pale of dharma. And under the Vajpayee government, they had started a commission under the leadership of Sri K. Parasaran on revisitation of the constitution through a dharmic perspective. So what they wanted to do was Bharatiya Karan of the Bharatiya Samvidhan. As usual, it was called Bhagwa Karan. And that project had to be stopped midway. And I haven't seen a discussion on the very same issue come about ever since. So the long answer to your short question is, our notions of justice, our notions of what is right and what is wrong emanate from that Gangotri called Dharma. And Gangotri itself comes from the Jata called Rita. And unless and until we understand these fundamental concepts, we will be muddled in either Anglo-Saxon or Roman notions of justice, which continues to be the case. And anyone who understands the history of common law, which is what we constantly call Bharat as a common law jurisdiction, common law has its origins in the Testament, Old and New. It has very clear biblical foundations. In the first book, with authority, I've cited this from their own judgments. So much so that, okay, so we all know the history of the British East India Company to a significant extent. So British East India Company was given an exclusive monopoly or a license to operate in Bharat. Now those entities who indulged in trade and who were not parties or who were not part of the East India Company, British East India Company, were hauled up and sued by the British East India Company in English courts. They said, I have the exclusive license from the government. How can you indulge in trade in this territory when you don't have the license? I'm the exclusive licensee for this trade. In those judgments, I'll tell you what the discussion was. A Christian state cannot indulge in trade with a heathen jurisdiction or a pagan jurisdiction. And a Christian citizen can indulge in trade with a non-Christian state only if it is sanctioned by the crown, because the crown is the protector of the Christian faith. And therefore, those who violated the exclusive license which was given to British East India Company were held guilty on 2 counts. One for violating the exclusive license, and the second for violating principles of Christianity. Both. I have cited those judgments in the book. This is the extent to which common law and Christian, let's say English jurisprudence, is heavily rooted in Christian jurisprudence or Judeo-Abrahamic traditions. Ask most lawyers and they'll be so comfortable saying, oh, we are proud bearers of common law tradition, we are proud torchbearers of Anglo-Saxon tradition. They don't even know how unsecular these traditions are. So they will bat for secularism under the constitution and also subscription to common law, which has unsecular origins at the same time. It is as antagonistic as it can get. What's your second question?
I think you've already answered my second question. It's just that the concepts are getting lost, in translation or the wrong kind of semantics. So I think
So
you've
when the
answered.
NEP was released, as opposed to asking how do we do a Bharatiya Karan of Indian legal education, there was only one paragraph, and if my memory serves me right, I had prepared a representation, para 16.7, where the only question that was asked was, how is artificial intelligence going to affect the justice dispensation system? In the national education policy, where you should have asked whether Hindu jurisprudence, such as the Shad Darshanas, do they find any place as part of political theories and political legal theory education in this country? That question was given a complete go by in such a crucial area. And hence, when someone says this is a very Hindu conscious government, I will always test a government's Hindu consciousness not on the basis of politics, but on the basis of policy. Until Rajniti does not affect Niti, it has really very little consequence.
Brilliant, thank you. Maybe ask one of the students to ask questions. Yeah, please.
Sir,
Sorry,
we'll come back to you.
Yeah.
We'll come
We'll
back.
come back to you, sir.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good
My
afternoon.
name is Manav. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.
Sir, my question is, in Chinese we say China as China, and in English also China as China. Same goes for Japan, Pakistan, American. Now, you have written a book, India that is Bharat. I can also say India that is Hindustan. India ke itne naam kyun? First. Second question is, sir, until when the batch of being a minority sector, Article 29 and 30 ke kavach mein, the government will give free hands on the protection of this religious minority community, and the government will carry on governing the religious majority temples. So these are my questions.
So one small correction. China is not China in Chinese. Japan is not Japan in Japanese. They have different names. And as someone who's done some amount of reading on this, that's the difference is China doesn't call itself China or using a name that the rest of the world has given it. Bharat constantly calls itself India, and it takes a lot of pride in it. And it feels that the use of Bharat to call Bharat, despite its presence in the constitution, somehow violates our misplaced notions of secularism. During the Constituent Assembly debates, there was a very clear discussion on why not Hindustan, why Bharat, Bharatvarsh, so on and so forth. They finally said, Jambu Dweep is a geographical notion, Bharatvarsha is a cultural notion, Bharat is a political notion. They're very clear about these distinctions. And so they said, Bharatvarsha or Aryavarta effectively represents a cultural sphere of influence. But as a political entity, you will call it Bharat. Hindustan is a later introduction thanks to the introduction of Farsi and how the Turkic Mongoloid invaders such as the Mughals started calling it Hindustan and so on and so forth. But Bharat was traced to the Puranas directly. So I have extracted discussions from the Constituent Assembly where they trace the use of Bharat to I think it's Vayu Purana. I'm not sure. I could be entirely wrong. You'll have to pardon me if I'm getting it wrong. And we've been constantly told that the word Bharat comes from Raja Bharat, which may not be entirely true also. So scholars will tell you Bharat effectively comes, and I'll be branded a Manuvadi now. The other name for Manu is Bharat. And therefore a land of Manu or the land of Manu is called Bharat. Bharat is not a word, it's actually an acronym. And I happened to come across this where one scholar, rather in fact, shared with me authoritative sources to exactly explain where the word Bharat comes from. Any case, coming back to the point, Hindustan is not something that I would want to subscribe to because I'm asking myself, where does this word come from? It comes from an imposed position from somebody else. What do my sources say are my name, and therefore Bharat is what I would be comfortable with. Coming to your question of secularism and all these things, it's useless to ask this question. Right to Education Act, when it was introduced by the Congress government, the opposition specifically said, why should minority educational institutions be exempt from the application of the Right to Education Act? And therefore, if you read the opposition debates at that point, they opposed it tooth and nail, saying this violates the principle of equality. If a societal obligation is cast, saying children until the age group of 14 must have the right to education, and you say that this is a societal obligation, why would you say that this obligation is exclusively only on those institutions which are non-minority institutions? In that sense, aren't you taking the two-nation theory forward by saying that certain groups are completely exempt from the application of laws? So on the one hand, you have a problem with the special treatment of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370, but you don't see a problem with the exemption given to minority institutions on Right to Education Act. Now let's come to the political hypocrisy of it. You have been in power for the last 8 years, close to 9 years now. Why didn't you repeal that particular exemption? Who is to blame here? The Congress really has no power today to stop anything that you do. You have the power to bulldoze anyone and everyone. Why haven't you done it? How many Hindu schools and Hindu-run institutions and non-minority institutions were shut down as a consequence of the economic liabilities imposed by the Right to Education Act? There are multiple websites dedicated to this. In Delhi alone, several hundreds of schools were shut. And yet there is no movement on this front. This government still believes that it's a badge of honor for it to showcase the budgetary allocation for minority welfare schemes. Minority Welfare Ministry was set up only in 2006. It was not set up under Nehru. 2006 it was set up. You opposed it when you were in opposition. Did you deem it fit to dismantle this particular ministry in 2014 or at least in 2019? Is this in your list of priorities at least in 2023? No, it's not. It's very convenient to constantly bash previous dispensations. I would say rightly so, bash them for what they have done because we are facing the continuing effects of it. But जब सत्ता आपके हाथ में आ जाता है, आप उसका प्रयोग कैसे करते हैं? पहले टर्म में तो आपके पास you'll have enough excuses to say नहीं इन्होंने इतना गड्ढा खोदा है कि मुझे रोड भरना पड़ रहा है. You can say all of that. आप दूसरे टर्म में भी यही कहेंगे. You can't say that you have enough clout to get the goodwill of the Middle East and all other countries, but you don't have enough clout to make these fundamental changes in your own country.